We hope everyone's having a good Thursday afternoon. We welcome you in to the first of two webinars related to Georgia Zone Credit Union's virtual car sale going on here in the month of October. I am Adam Schick, and I am joined today by Lisa Van. Lisa is the Consumer Lending Manager for Georgia Zone Credit Union, and we're here today to talk about some basics of the car buying process, of the lending process. That's part one. We'll be back here in a couple weeks for part two, when we'll talk to the folks from Car Finder to actually get into the nitty gritty of what cars should I buy, how do I buy the car. But in order to do that, you have to have the financing, which is a big part of the focus today. So Lisa, thanks for being with us. I guess just to get started, tell us a little bit about what you do at Georgia Zone. What does that title mean for people?
Thanks, Adam. Excited to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Adam said, my name is Lisa Van. I'm the Consumer Loan Manager here at the Credit Union. I've been with the Credit Union about 5 years now, and I work with a great team of loan officers. So what we do at the Credit Union is we help our members with all of their lending needs. So that's from personal loans, boat loans, car loans, specifically what we'll be talking about today, and really everything in between.
And if you guys have questions that aren't covered in the wide list that we have, we encourage you to put them in the comments below. Our producer extraordinaire, Will Miller, is going to handle those and make sure that we have a chance to get to them. And again, anything that's on your mind that it would be helpful to you about this process, we want to hear from you guys. We want to help you. And if you're seeing this after the fact, if you're not with us live, you can put those comments below and we will get back to you and make sure you have answers to those critical questions. So Lisa, let's start with something very simple. We're kind of taking people A to Z on this. So the first step is, I'm thinking about buying a car. How do I put that into action? What are the steps I need to be taking if I want to pursue buying a car?
That's a great question, Adam. We get that question a lot. We handle the car loan applications that come in over the phone and online. And when we're picking up the phone, members are always asking us, what are those steps? What does that look like? The first thing that we start off with is getting a affordable monthly budget from every single member. We want to make sure that they have a realistic budget in place. So that includes one, it's going to be their monthly budget of how much they can afford to pay. The second thing is really considering the total cost of that vehicle. So it's not just the purchase price, they're going to be the taxes that are included, dealership fees. And then even in addition to taxes and fees, always giving them or making sure that they have a little bit of a cushion. It's really simple to say, hey, I'm looking to buy a $20,000 car, but we know once we log in online and start surfing the web or we get to that dealership, that $20,000 quickly turns into $22,000, sometimes $25,000. So we want to make sure they have a cushion. The third thing with setting a budget is also considering the other costs with owning a vehicle. So that's going to be your car insurance, your maintenance, and then of course gas. So we're looking at the full picture to make sure that they truly can afford that vehicle every single month.
And how much do you need to anticipate extra? I mean, when you're building that into a budget, theoretically, as you said, you've got X, Y, and Z you have to cover, but then there's all sorts of unforeseen circumstances that could be part of that total cost. So how do you anticipate that? What do you do to try and prepare for that?
So it really depends. That's where we always add a little bit of a cushion. For taxes and fees, it's hard to really estimate that because it depends on the dealership. We've seen some dealerships that may not charge a fee at all. Some dealerships charging up to $1,000. So we disclose that to the member, make sure that they're including that. In regards to taxes, if they have a vehicle that they've picked out, we can estimate what that tax will be. We can go directly to our Department of Revenue site to determine what those taxes are. A good rule of thumb is somewhere around 7% of that value. So we'll estimate that, add that in. But that's really the first step, is the budget piece of it. There's a couple more steps I wanted to explore with you as well. The second thing is having your documents ready. That's really important, is knowing your financial situation. If you're looking to purchase a car and you're not paying cash for it, you're going to be needing financing. So you're going to be completing an application, and that's going to include information about, what your monthly income is, what your annual income is. And oftentimes we may need proof of that as well. So that's step number two. In addition to knowing your finances, I also recommend that every individual that's looking to purchase a vehicle to also know where their credit standing is. You know, they want to plan for that. They want to ensure that their credit report is accurate, and they're looking at that before they're even applying for a loan. If there's any errors or mistakes on that, you know, we want to get that buttoned up and fixed before, you know, they're going to that dealership or logging in online to buy that vehicle.
It's funny, actually, I'm not in the process of buying a car right now. I have a 2005 Highlander. It's still serving me very well. But I'm currently trying to buy my first house. And there's a lot of these questions we're talking about now are very similar just in terms of how the lending process works. And I had no idea the degree to which you have to have all of these ducks in a row. You have to have all these documents ready, and you have to really be ready to open up the books. So I think, you know, I can certainly relate to that, but it's not always easy to do that at the drop of a hat. So it's almost like if you're thinking about this seriously, would you say these are things you should have in line before you really even start? Because even if you find something you like, you're going to have to do all of this anyway, and then it may not be an option anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to plan ahead. If, you know, but sometimes, you know, for folks, they'll call in and they did plan ahead, you know, their car, the engine went out or transmission or something happened, you know, they got into an accident. So, you know, we definitely suggest to plan ahead, but if, you know, life happens and you're not able to, you know, we have loan officers available, you know, 24/7 to be able to help and walk them through that process. You know, I think the most important thing for if you're buying a car or a home, like you're in the process of doing, Adam, is getting pre-approved. That is the most important step. You know, you want to make sure that you're pre-approved so that you know going into, you know, the purchase if you can actually afford it. The worst thing that could happen is you get excited, you log in online, you find the vehicle of your dreams, you probably already start picturing yourself in it.
Right.
You could probably feel the way that, you know, you can accelerate that car, all of that, right? You're imagining that, and then you go out and you try to buy it and you can't afford it. You know, that's not a good experience. So we definitely recommend all of our members get pre-approved first. You know, that's where we come into play. Your credit union is going to be the best place to be able to do that. You know, we have those competitive rates. We have the lower fees, but most importantly, you know, you're going to have an advocate there that's going to be walking you through that process from start to finish.
Can you talk about pre-approval versus pre-qualification? What the differences are there and how it relates to this process?
Yeah, that's a good question because I see it used, both words pre-qualified, pre-approval, used interchangeably. So it really depends on the lender or the institution. Most of the time, a pre-qualification is gathering information on an applicant and being able to offer them some type of promotion. But normally it's preliminary, which is like a soft pull on their credit report. So it's not always accurate. They still have to apply, the applicant or the member would still have to apply to qualify for that. A pre-approval is typically either the second step in a pre-qualification process where, you know, that member or applicant is interested and now they want to go through the process and they're actually applying. Or even if they're not pre-qualified and they just, you know, come directly to the credit union or their lender, they would then apply for the loan. It's a full comprehensive, you know, credit pull. It's a hard inquiry at that time. And then we're able to pre-qualify them. A lot of times, you know, circling back to what we talked about with the first three steps, we're getting their actual income, we're collecting documents, so we know what they're pre-qualified for, or pre-approved for, I should say.
In terms of the financing itself, what are the different routes that people can take?
So with financing, there's two routes that are the most popular. The first one of them is going to the dealership directly and applying at the dealership where they will route your information to the different dealerships that they partner with, and then they come back with a rate and a quote for you at that time. The second option is going through a direct channel. That direct channel is going to be your credit union, a finance company, or a bank. This is the one that I recommend because, you know, we talked about having a plan going into it. You know, you're going to know what you can afford going into that dealership. Again, same thing, more competitive rates, better discounts, and then you have a partner with you the entire way through.
In terms of, you know, getting a sense of what you can afford, is that something that people should do before starting everything? Because, you know, I feel like some people, you'll maybe think, oh, I really want this car, and you'll fall in love with it before you know if it's something that's really realistic for you. At what part of the process should you identify what you can afford?
Right in the beginning, before you even start looking for that vehicle, you should know what you can afford. So that kind of goes back to your monthly budgeted payment and then the total walkout price of what you're looking to afford or looking to purchase. You know, talk to your loan officer, allow them to walk you through that if you don't feel comfortable, but you can also do that self-service yourself. There are lots of loan calculators out there. You know, you can search on Google or online to find them, but you also can go to our website to key in, you know, I think I'm looking for this vehicle, give it a little bit of that cushion that we talked about. There's estimated rates on there and terms, and then it will actually spit out a payment for you. So you can see if that's something that you can afford. The other piece of it that I always share, it's not just what you can afford, but it's what that vehicle is valued at. So you may be pre-qualified, let's throw out there $30,000, and you can afford a $30,000 payment, but you find the vehicle and you pull a value on it. We use like Kelley Blue Book and NADA to value our vehicles to see how much they're actually worth. You know, you could be approved for that 30,000, but if that vehicle is only worth 24,000, that's not a good purchase or a good buy for you.
Right. Is there an amount or a percentage that you try and keep people in terms of what a payment should be relative to your income? So for say with housing, it shouldn't be more than 30% of your income is what you usually hear. Is there a number on that for cars or not necessarily?
There is. It really depends on the underwriting side. It's going to depend on where your credit is. You know, the payment to income ratio that we look at, it's going to depend. It can go from, you know, sometimes 10% up to 15%. So everybody's financial situation is unique. So we look at every individual differently. So that does play a part in it. We also look at like their debt to income ratio as well. So not just that monthly, you know, how much debts they have on their credit report over how much income they're making monthly. That's another ratio that we look at, and we make sure that the member can afford that payment and they can still live comfortably after making their car payment monthly.
Again, if you're watching and you have questions we haven't addressed or things that may be a little off this, but still relevant to the auto lending process, please do comment just below this video. And again, if we're doing it live, we can address it right now. If it comes later, we could also answer those questions and follow up with you. We're here to help. And Lisa is trying to take us through this process in as much detail as possible. I want to talk about something we've mentioned a few times, which is your credit score. It's kind of for a lot of people, this weird concept, and it's not necessarily like, well, how does it work? How does this number, where does it come from? What affects it? I guess just for background, can you talk about your credit score and why it is so important in this process?
Yes, absolutely. So credit's very important when you're looking to purchase a vehicle or any type of loan or lending that you're doing. That's going to tell your lender if you have the capacity to pay this loan back. Your credit is made up of the length of credit that you have, the amounts that you owe on your loans, the types of credit that you have, which can be secured or unsecured. Secured meaning there's collateral tied to it. So like the home loan that you mentioned, Adam, that would be secured. A car loan would be secured. Unsecured would be your credit cards, personal loans that you may take out. We also look at new credit that impacts your credit score as well. Probably the most important thing is going to be payment history. You know, how well are you paying back the lenders that you borrowed money from? You know, all of those things impact your credit score. And that credit score, typically depending on the lender, is going to impact the interest rate that you receive on that loan, which of course impacts how much your monthly payment is going to be, and then the overall cost of that vehicle, of buying that vehicle. So all of those play a really, really important part in the credit score. But I always tell members, don't be intimidated if your credit score isn't where you want it to be. You know, we definitely use that credit score, but what's more important is like the content in your credit report. So I call it like the meat and potatoes. So what's actually in your credit report? Sometimes we see applicants that will apply with us and they may have a really high credit score, but it's almost inflated because they only have one trade line. You know, a trade line is an account that you have on your credit report. And they may only have one small trade line they just opened. They're doing a really great job paying it well. And so their score may say that they're 750, which is a great credit score to have, but they really are pretty limited in their lending experience. And then another applicant may have a lower credit score, but they have a lot more credit history, more accounts that they're actually playing really well on, but they have one or two blemishes that they may have had a few years ago. When something came up, they've recovered from it, they're paying well. So their score may be lower, but we're going to look at their entire financial picture. And if they qualify with us, we'll consider them for a loan. And then, so I always say, don't be intimidated by just the credit score. It's more than just the credit score.
How can people check their credit score? Because this is also tricky, and you have multiple providers of credit score. When you start to get into the nitty-gritty of the credit scores, it does get a little confusing. So if people want to check their credit score, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Adam. There's so many different services out there now where you can either check your credit score, monitor your credit score. I always recommend, though, to go to annualcreditreport.com. So annualcreditreport.com, you can obtain a free report through any of the agencies, so TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, once a year for free. You're not going to get your score on that report, but it's going to provide you all of your accounts that are listed on your report. You can regularly review that, check the history. You want to make sure there's nothing suspicious or unexpected on your credit report. In regards to the score, if you're applying with a lender, so if you apply with Georgia's Own, you have a loan officer that's assigned to your application, you can talk to them about your credit report. They can't provide you a copy of it, but they can tell you what your score is and talk through some of the items that are on your credit report.
And you touched on this a second ago, but I think it is important to point out that one of the benefits of working with Georgia's Own and working with a credit union is you're going to have that more local approach. It's going to be more, okay, we're going to look at this and dig into it, as opposed to a big bank could probably see a number and you're a number. And if the number isn't there, then that's the end of the conversation. Instead of being able to really look into it and say, okay, what's the history here? How can we make this work?
Yep, you're absolutely right, Adam. Sometimes we ask those questions and our members are like, I've never had anyone ask me this many questions about my credit report or, dive this deep. And I always let the members know the reason that we do this is we're trying to do everything that we can to get you approved. So if you have some negative marks on your credit, let us know what happened, explain that. We want to paint that picture for our underwriters and ultimately get you approved. So you're absolutely right about that.
What's the length of the process? And you just brought up working with the underwriters as well, because there's multiple events involved in the chain. What is the timeline generally for, let's say, my initial inquiry to getting to a level where I'm pre-approved and can move forward freely?
So it depends. There's a few different channels where a member can apply with the credit union. So we have the option to apply over the phone. That's 24/7. So depending on the credit history, when we pull the credit report, the financials and all that, sometimes we can get approval right away. So we can give that member a decision on the spot. Other times it may have to be reviewed by a underwriter. And so that might take up to 24 hours for a decision or same business day. That's the same process in our branches. Our branches, every single branch at Georgia's Own has a lender available to take that application in the lobby or in the office as well. So, and then the third one is going to be online. So all three channels that we have, it's typically the same turnaround time. If you're applying online and it's an instant approval, like I was saying, depending on your credit file, you might get it approval right away. You'll be notified of that immediately online, and then you're assigned to a loan officer that then reaches out to you.
Getting back to credit reports for a second, because we talked about some of the ways that you can really look into it and see, okay, well, maybe, this may not be great from a number standpoint, but we think this, we can work with this. If the answer to that is no, right? If the credit score is simply too low, there's too many red flags, what are steps people can take to actively improve their credit score and resolve it to a point where they can be approved for the process?
So that's another good question, Adam. We aren't credit counselors or advisors for our members, but we can still point them in the right direction, give them general information on certain things that they can do to improve their credit. We talked about how credit is impacted by, your payment history, the types of credit you have, how much money you owe on those loan accounts that you have. So paying on time, that it seems like a no-brainer, but that's the number one thing you can do. Pay your loans on time. The second thing is don't use up all your credit. If you have a credit card and you have a limit on that credit card, you don't want to max out that limit. That does impact your credit score negatively. So that's something that we inform our members about as well. We give them tips and tricks, set reminders, to make sure that you're paying your loans on time, or set up auto payment. We also have a lot of resources on our website. So we have something called Achieve, which has modules that members can utilize. About typically, I think it's 5 to 7 minutes each module, but there's modules specific to like credit scores and reports. When we're talking about credit cards, there's why pay more than the minimum on your credit card, how credit cards work. There's even one about car loans. So we definitely refer our members over so that they can self-serve and look up that information themselves and stay educated. So the next time, they come around 6 months later and they apply with us, we can get them approved.
Again, we're encouraging your questions. You can submit them below in the comments section here on Facebook. Shannon chimed in on this exact topic. She says, my credit score is starting to go up. I'm thinking about refinancing, but I don't know if my score is where it needs to be. What should I do?
So give us a call. That's the easiest thing to do, Adam. Give us a call. Allow us to ask you some questions, understand your financial situation. Before we can give you a definitive approval, denial, or counteroffer, we will have to pull your credit to be able to determine that. But if you have a dialogue with one of our great loan officers, either over the phone or in the branch, they can at least start pulling your credit information. They can pull the value of the vehicle, and they can give you a good idea if that's something that we can move forward with or not. If your credit has improved, but not to the point where we're able to finance you today, the same thing we just talked about, Adam, we'll review that and we'll give you some tips and tricks and things that you can do to come back, the next time around. Thank
you for that question. More questions coming in. This one is, should I buy a new car? Should I lease? Should I pre-own? I mean, there's lots of different ways you can get cars, different kinds of cars. How does that relate to the lending process, or does it not necessarily matter? So that's oftentimes that's personal preference with buying or leasing. If you're going to keep that vehicle for a very long time, of course, we always recommend purchasing because, you're going to get the most bang for your buck if you're going to keep it through the life of that vehicle. But if you're somebody that trades in a vehicle all the time, and every 2 years, 3 years, I have a girlfriend, I just saw her last weekend, and she leases her cars because she trades in her vehicles every 2 years. So it just wasn't worth it for her to finance it. So for her, leasing makes more sense. So that's a question that we ask our members: how long do they plan to keep their vehicle? Most of the time, our members are keeping it, longer than 3 years. Then financing might be a good option, but that's typically a personal preference when it comes to that. And obviously right now, interest rates are very low, historically low. Can you talk about where that fits into this process and maybe the additional buying power it would give someone now as opposed to a year ago? Yeah. So interest rates are really low. That's why we've also seen a lot of 100% financing on our loans. Not because members cannot put a down payment on the vehicle, but they're using that money to invest or do something else with it that's going to work a little bit harder for them, and they can take advantage of that lower interest rate. So we have seen a lot of that over the last couple of years, which is a great option if you can qualify for that 100% financing. We do that in the credit union all the time. And then we also have products that we can protect our members with if they're not putting a huge chunk down. So that's another benefit of the credit union too, in the car buying process, is being able to take advantage of some of the different protection options that we have. Gap coverage is one of those things. But to what you're saying, yeah, we absolutely have seen that in the last couple of years. In general, is it better to take a lower rate or a rebate? Because you often see promotions, and I'm not sure if it depends on the bigger picture overall with what's happening with some of these rates, but I'm curious where that fits.
That's a great question. It depends. We can calculate that for our members. Sometimes it is better to take the lower interest rate. Other times it's better to take the rebate. I have found that oftentimes the rebate is better, and then the 0%, or sometimes you'll see like a 1% discount, because rates are so low, like you were saying, Adam. Over the life of the loan, when we calculate how much interest that member is going to pay, they may only pay, $2,000 in interest, $3,000 in interest, but they'd be giving up a $5,000 rebate to be able to get that 0% at the dealership. So I always recommend that our members are calculating what that overall cost is so they can really compare it apples to apples. The easiest way to do that is there are loan calculators out there. Our website has a loan calculator that will tell you if the rebate is better than the lower interest rate. And if you Google it, there's a plethora of loan calculators out there that will do the same thing. You can input the purchase price and the estimated interest rate, the rebate, and it will spit the information out for you.
More questions coming in on Facebook. We appreciate that. Keita asks, should I wait until I've paid my car payment for over a year before trying to refinance?
It's a good question. I recommend, it depends again on your credit profile. If you have established credit and you maybe went to the dealership and financed with them, didn't have an opportunity to finance at your credit union, we can turn around and refinance it right away. We have members that will finance a vehicle on the weekend and call us, and we can refinance it the next week. We just need that registration. As long as the vehicle's registered and they qualify, we can do it immediately. If the member has credit challenges and they're worried that they don't have enough credit history to refinance the loan, then in that situation, I always recommend at least 6 months of good payment history. After showing 6 months of on-time payments, come on into the credit union. We'll be happy to look at that application. In that situation, if she's had 1 year payments, I would recommend that she applies.
Thank you for that question, Keita. Jennifer asks, does student loan debt impact your credit rating and your score in ways that would prevent possibly getting a car loan?
So the student loan, we do consider that. Those are open trade lines, open loans and debts that our members and applicants have. So it is considered in the car buying process, but we try to dig a little bit deeper into that. If a member has had some, I call them blemishes, but some challenges paying that, we always ask, are they up to date on that? Sometimes we ask for proof to show that they're not behind. So those are things that we consider. As long as they're trying to make those payments and repairing that, that's something that we factor in. We also consider, what that monthly payment is. If the member's in deferment, we ask a lot of questions because we want to make sure that when we're approving or declining a loan, we have all the accurate information. So
I still have a few more minutes to take your questions. If you want to chime in below in the comment section. Thanks to everybody who has already. And again, if you're seeing this later on in the archive, you can put the questions below and we will get them answered for you. Lisa, just curious, as we start to wrap up here, anything else we haven't discussed that you think is important for consumers to know and for members to know about the options that Georgia Zone has available for them?
One thing we haven't discussed that we're actually doing the entire month of October, and it's really timely with what's going on with the pandemic, we are doing a virtual car sale. So it is completely contactless, where we have members that are pre-qualified. We can actually get them over to our partner at CarFinders, and we have a website for that. It's Georgia's own carfinder.com, but they have a inventory of vehicles once our members are pre-qualified that they can explore that are going to be already pre-marked and discounted. So typically going to be much more affordable than what they find at the dealership. And then we have some really great offers for our members right now too. With the virtual car sale, it's a 0.25% off discount if they buy through the car sale. And then also a 0.25% discount if they decide that they want to utilize the auto debit option that we have coming from one of their accounts here. So that's definitely something that I want our members, taking advantage of, because there's really great prices on that. They also have the ability to just deliver it straight to your home or office as well.
And we're going to have the link also below in the comments section to check out the virtual car sales, see what the options are from Car Finder. And again, we'll be back actually in 2 weeks. We'll have the people from Car Finder to talk more about that side of the process now that we've gotten our full download on the lending part that you need to have before going on to that next step. So with that being said, Lisa, I think that's everything we have today. But thank you so much for sharing all this information with us. And again, if you're watching this after the fact and you have questions we have not addressed, please type them in the comments section and we'll be sure to get back to you. And again, we'll have the link below if you want to check out the virtual car sale options. But most of all, if this is something you're considering, know that Georgia Zone has this available, and this is going on right now throughout the month of October with deals you can find through that link. So Lisa, thank you again for sharing all this with us. And we hope that people find the cars of their dreams very soon as a result of this.
Thanks, Adam. It was a pleasure.